The moopsie drinks your bones!
How does something drink bones?
Hey, what's that bone-sucking sound?
Welcome, friends. We're back discussing Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, the second premiere episode, I suppose, since they dropped them together. I have no bones, yet I must flee. Happy Star Trek Day, since that is the celebration going on right now, although the special on Paramount right now is kind of short and not very impressive, but I digress. We will be getting into some spoilers for whatever that means to you here in Lower Decks, so duck out now if that's not your thing. Otherwise, well, let's crack on with the show. So, if you remember, we left off last episode with a little bit of a tease towards that overarching storyline, some crazy weird alien ship that showed up and just took out a Klingon vessel. We actually spent a little bit of time with the Klingon crew before we saw them taken out. However, maybe I'm just kind of throwing this wild theory out there right now. Maybe they're not dead. Perhaps this thing is destroying the ships and destroying all the technology, but it's actually taking the organic life forms, the people. I don't know. I just have a feeling there might be something more going on there that we're going to get a grand resolution on, because we start this episode out with a very similar situation. We get a Romulan vessel, and it's, played up for laughs. All the crew members are backstabbing each other. They're all plotting. They're all seeing conspiracies everywhere. Typical Romulan shtick. And then same thing happens to them. They're destroyed. But so far, both of these plot points have not tied into the actual episodes themselves. They're little nuggets, they're little teases. I'm sure they'll actually be brought into the storyline. It's just kind of showing us, meanwhile, out there in the universe, this is happening. Not entirely sure how I feel about that. I do like the fact that they're not spending an over amount of time building suspense and coming up with this mystery box thing at the end of the series, because it's not actually tying into our episodes. But at the same time, without it tying into the episodes, it does feel a bit disjointed, but I have a feeling after maybe episode 3 or 4, everything will come together and it will influence the main plot. So we'll see that when we get there. But this episode, in and of itself, was dealing with the ramifications of last episode, where all of the 3 lower deckers, aside from Rutherford, got promotions. So we got Tendi, we got Boimler, and we got Mariner. They all got their promotions, and Mariner seems to be having a hard time with it. Tendi, pretty absent from this episode. The only real stuff she has to do at the very beginning is try to convince Rutherford that they're not going to move on without him, and that they'll still be friends. We get a little bit of that later on in the episode. Boimler is kind of dealing with this whole moving out on his own and getting quarters, and none of the quarters actually kind of live up. And Mariner, well, she goes on the main mission to a menagerie, an alien zoo that accidentally kind of took 2 humans and put them in the zoo, and it's played up for laughs. We get a lot of callbacks to any sort of exotic Star Trek creature, and possibly some outside of Star Trek creatures in this menagerie. I'm not going to go through them all. Probably my favorite in there was that weird orb, snake cobra thing that, I don't know exactly what you call it, a hydra maybe, that Q turned into way back on one of his early appearances. That was probably my favorite in there. Some animated series creatures in there, of course. But the main plot here is that the cutest little creature, which reminded me of several things I've seen before, I can't really put my finger on it, but I guess it's kind of a combination of Nibbler, the bone vampire, and Lumily, I think was the character's name from the Mario movie.
Moopsie.
Do you imprison everything you like?
Of course!
Isn't it sad? Life in prison is very, very sad.
It kind of reminded me of an amalgamation of those, because we determine in this episode that even though it's the cutest little adipose looking thing, it is actually the most vicious and violent because it eats bones. There is a quasi-Futurama plot going on here. There is also what appears to be, at least to me, little in-jokes and references to Seinfeld going on in the subplots of Boimler trying to go pick out his new quarters.
Ah!
And we get this little ongoing rivalry with Rutherford. He is trying to fast track his way to a promotion so he doesn't miss out on his friends. And he has this new character who is transferred into engineering who just keeps one-upping him at all stops. And every time he kind of deals with him, it's like a little...
Newman!
Perfect.
Not sure if that's what they were going for, but these references together in this episode definitely lead me to believe that they were drawing some sort of influence or inspiration from Seinfeld, and as I already mentioned, Futurama, let alone all the other little Star Trek Easter eggs, because Boimler has his little action figures. There's a couple different appearances when he's moving all of his things to his new quarters, the Ad Astra per Aspera poster that we got to see in Strange New World, so it's nice to see that continuity, I guess, kind of making sense and playing into the show now in episode 1 and 2, and we also got to see, with his collection of action figures, something I was disappointed to find out I was wrong about. He had a Spock and a Kirk action figure. I believe he also had, it may have been Data, it was kind of hard to see, but I thought for a brief moment, until I really zoomed in and looked closely, that it was going to be a Hazard team member from Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, and I was really excited for them to be bringing that reference into the show, but upon closer inspection, it looks like it was probably just a typical Starfleet officer with a phaser rifle, so maybe they'll make a reference to Star Trek Elite Force. I hope they do, but as of right now, I guess they didn't. The whole point of the menagerie story is to show that Mariner and Ransom are kind of butting heads, each of them trying to do the opposite, I guess. Ransom is trying to make sure she doesn't sabotage her way back to a demotion because he realizes she is a self-sabotager, so he's not going to let any of her misbehavior actually result in her demotion. She is trying to actively go for a demotion by doing everything wrong, and this is kind of played up for laughs with the fact that they have a brand new first away team officer who's going out, and this is kind of his first experience. Meanwhile, we've got this whole escaped alien killer on the menagerie, and they have to try and rescue the humans who have been falsely imprisoned. However, shock and awe, at the end of the episode, we finally reveal that these humans were in fact the ones who were trying to get everyone killed in the menagerie because they saw profit and they wanted to take over. I don't know. I guess I kind of saw that coming, that there was something more to them. I didn't really think it was going to be a profit motive. I didn't really think they were going to be trying to take over the menagerie so that they could make money from it. That seems a bit odd. And what they ended up doing is they left them in the menagerie for the next team to come along and have to deal with. The episode overall didn't have too much going on plot-wise, not a lot of meat on the bone for that, just a lot of character moments and development and growth from our newly promoted characters. Rutherford at the end of the episode actually is promoted because he simply asks for it. It turns out that he had turned down promotions on various occasions, especially the one from when he removed the hull 2 seasons ago, was that? And they were able to escape that situation, so he's been turning them down in order to stay lower decks with the rest of his friends. Now that they've all been promoted ahead of him, he simply asked for the promotion, and he is granted it over Newman. I know that wasn't his name. I'm going to keep doing that. Levesque or Levisk, something like that, I think was the character's name. Wonder if we're going to see that character again. But we didn't get any more with T'Lyn here, and at the end of the episode, Boimler and Rutherford actually move in together, and that is kind of the culmination of the promotion stories. I think that we were told early on that Rutherford had a unique journey to his promotion, and I have to imagine this is what he was talking about. They're all promoted, they're all going to move into their own quarters now, so that's going to present a new dynamic, at least conceivably, and we are getting a little more action behind the scenes as far as the alien ship that's doing something to alien races. We basically saw all that we've seen already in the preseason trailer, so I'm kind of curious to see how they build upon that and actually explore that in the future. I'm definitely intrigued. I don't know if I would say this is my favorite episode of the season, even though there's already been 2. I am a sucker for Voyager, so the Voyager stuff last episode, even though it didn't really feel like a premiere to me, was probably a little bit better, but I'm enjoying this season so far. What are your thoughts? Are you liking this? Do you have any problems with it? Do you not watch Lower Decks? Whatever, leave all that down below. Again, happy Star Trek Day, and until next time,
I increased the power output of the Tucker tubes by 7 picocochrans.